or a fair way to actually achieve it. Because I think we need the equity, but we need some flexibility. And it's a question of how we mix those. So I just wanted to make those before the.
Okay, let's thank you. Let's move on to public comments. Let me just remind everybody a couple of ground rules. Number one, I'd like everyone to limit their comments to 2 minutes in order to be able to hear everyone and give the council ample time to discuss this. I'll raise my hand and signal when we get to 1:45, so you got 15 seconds to complete. Let's also remember that there are 4 workshops, so there's ample time for everybody's comments to be heard by staff. This is the main opportunity for people's comments to be heard, for the public's comments to be heard by the council, but there will be 4 workshops in October, so you will be heard. There'll be flyers in the back that show the workshop schedule, and again, if there are a number of you that have the same comment because you've been working together and have produced a letter, it would be very helpful if only one person commented. So let's start with Chantal Fletcher, and next up will be Monica Palmiero.
Good afternoon. My name is Chanel Fletcher, and I work for Climate Plan, which is a statewide coalition of nonprofit organizations working to advance sustainable communities. First, I really want to thank the members of the council and staff. I think the Strategic Growth Council has long been a champion to promote sustainability statewide, and we are grateful for your hard work and leadership. I think as evidenced by the council's discussion and the staff members as well, these draft guidelines are an important step forward, and we support the general framework. At the same time, we do have a number of concerns around specific details of the program. While I won't list all of those details here, I will note that one big thing is really the VMT reductions. We are very concerned with how this is being assessed, and we know that this is also on ARB's plate, but we really encourage the Strategic Growth Council to make sure that that is something that is clear so that advocates understand and know how we are assessing these. We also believe that the co-benefits are extremely important, and in the scoring, I think it was 15 to 20% of the general weight, and that is something that we believe is very low considering that co-benefits are a huge part of this program. So we would really advise staff to increase the weight to ensure that that is something that is supported overall by this program. Climate Plan looks forward to working with the council, with staff to address these issues as well as other ones that we have and ensure that these guidelines support and promote sustainable communities. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Monica, and then Mike McKeever, and after that, Phoebe Seaton.
Hi, I cede my comments to California Coalition for Rural Housing Executive Director.
Good afternoon, Rob Wiener, California Coalition for Rural Housing. First, I'd like to commend the staff for appealing to us to try to work with them to develop a program that will work in rural areas. Now, since the 1970s, for good reason, every state housing and community development finance program that I'm aware of has either been targeted specifically to rural communities or has created a set-aside for rural communities. And that's for good reason, because no one has yet designed the program that will not disadvantage rural communities in a direct competition with urban and suburban communities. We haven't seen that program. Rural California is separate and unequal. That's why we need special consideration for these communities. Unfortunately, the rules that we've seen so far are designed to fail in rural communities. Number one is they take 40% right off the top, at least 40%, for TOD projects that will not benefit rural communities, and in fact will not benefit most communities in the state that cannot meet those very narrow headways during peak commute hours. Secondly, the 50-unit minimum threshold requirement is too high in rural communities. Third, the 20 units to the acre net density requirement is also too high. Fourth, the requirement that projects include at least one transit station or stop will also disqualify really good rural projects that don't have transit, but which can demonstrate qualitatively and quantitatively reductions in VMT. Fifth, the local government co-application process is very troubling because some rural local governments are quite politically conservative. They don't necessarily welcome affordable housing. And also, they have very low capacity, so they may not have the capacity to be the lead applicant. And finally, the 20% requirement for affordable housing. Why have 80-20 projects? What is the GHG science that says that a 60-40 project or a 50-50 project or a majority of units being affordable won't reduce GHG?
Thank
We're
you.
sort of befuddled by that.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Mike McKeever, Phoebe Seaton, and after that, Wendy Olson.
I'm here representing CalCog, the statewide association of MPOs and COGs, county transportation agencies. I might beg the chair's indulgence to make a comment with my SACOG CEO hat on as well. But I'm mainly here to represent CalCog, and I'm not here, Secretary Laird, to relitigate the law, but I am here to help you implement it effectively. So let me remind you, in part, what it requires is that the council shall coordinate with the MPOs and other regional agencies to identify and recommend projects within their respective jurisdictions. I think we're partners in this, is my take. We need to be on the same side of the table. We need to be taking advantage of each other's unique assets to deliver the most greenhouse gas savings possible for the limited amount of money that's available this year and going forward. That's the goal. You've had a lot of discussions about some of the details in the staff information in front of you. At the end of the day, I think the test is pretty simple. Do you deliver the most greenhouse gas savings to the state possible within this? If you can get the other co-benefits with it that the statute requires and which you want, and we all want, that's even better. So I think some of the unique assets that your MPO partners bring to the table are, one, capacity. Your discussion, we've had this discussion for decades in terms of trying to figure out what's a fair and equitable way, an effective way to disseminate funding. So we have a good ground game for you. We have lots and lots of people in the field with lots and lots of knowledge of projects. And because of a prior partnership with the state where we've been working on the razor's edge of the greenhouse gas emission target reductions that the Air Resources Board gives to us, I think we have clear policy alignment with you in doing that. So I think we can help, and I think it will be better if we work together. With my, can I say just 30 seconds with my SACOG hat on?
Okay.
So I see the sign. It's not that CalCog disagrees with this, it's just not within what we've voted on. I would really encourage you to try, because you have the performance imperative of the statute, to be as flexible and as simple as you can be as to how those greenhouse gas savings are delivered to you. The more prescriptive you are, the more categories you have. I don't think you're going to have some of that. The statute requires it. But if you can lean towards flexibility and simplicity and balance it all on the razor's edge of how much savings are being delivered, which the state will be in charge of determining, I think that's where you want to go.
Thanks very much. Phoebe Seaton, Wendy Alson, and then Erica Whitcomb.
Thanks so much. Phoebe Seaton, Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. First, I want to commend staff and the working group, and I don't commend that easily. They've just put in a tremendous amount of work, extraordinarily respectful and just fantastic, and we look forward to continuing to work with them over the next 2 months. A couple just key overarching points. Benefiting disadvantaged communities is not near enough. Not near robust enough. Not only does there need to be a higher threshold, a higher amount of points addressing community orientation, but there needs to be better specificity in how projects are benefiting disadvantaged communities as defined by 535 and lower income households, and ensuring that those benefits match with what disadvantaged communities have identified as their needs. Also want to echo that some of the issues addressing the more rural communities are problematic. One issue that just want to clarify through the next month or so is whether the definition of non-metropolitan areas and communities with a 10,000 population threshold, what that will do for some of the more rural areas if we really want to set that 10,000 person threshold. And many other, I think folks will talk about the 80-20 issue. 20% of housing at 80% threshold should be much deeper. It should be threshold that it be deeper. And I think others will discuss that the lower income households, actually the better housing opportunities you provide, the more benefit you're going to see in GHG reduction. And again, I think Secretary Rodriguez brought this up, the requirement that there be a transit stop may be an undue burden and not necessarily achieve the goals of the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Wendy Alfson, Erica Whitcomb, Jean Merrill, please.
Wendy Alfton with California Walks. I wanted to echo the comments that have been made regarding disadvantaged communities and really strengthening the demonstration of the true benefit, the community prioritization of the need, and the location as well. And that I also wanted to stress that the integrated core connectivity projects, in our view, need to clearly be multimodal and not just road projects. So if there's any kind of a road project involved in that, it needs to be a complete street project. That walkable corridors are often considered to be the sidewalk or the sidewalk plus the park, if we call it a park strip rather than a parking strip. But for there to actually be walkable interconnectivity, people have to be able to get across the street and they have to be able to get to the transit stop. And so the connectivity in many, it has to be fine-grained, and so I think that it shouldn't be prescriptive from your point of view. But I wanted to point out that some of the best projects that we've heard about that benefit disadvantaged communities come out of your own Sustainable Communities Planning Grant program, and you did a lot of work on what is benefiting disadvantaged communities there that I think you really can incorporate and build upon. And we look forward to working with you in realizing this program, which has great potential to tie transportation, jobs, and housing in a livable environment that people can walk.
Thank you. Erica Whitcomb.
Hi, I'm Erica Whitcomb with Policy Link. Just want to thank the staff and council for your leadership in the development of these guidelines and for the opportunity to be participating throughout their development. I also wanted to echo what has been previously stated, that the community orientation criteria should be weighted more heavily, that there should be also priority points assigned to projects such as integrative connectivity projects that are benefiting disadvantaged communities, in addition to the affordable housing projects, that priority should be placed for projects that are specifically achieving co-benefits for disadvantaged communities, that priority should be placed for applicants that include community workforce agreements that are increasing access to living wage jobs for specifically disadvantaged communities, and that applicants should be required to explain how or describe the process that allowed for the community to reach their priorities and how these are reflected in the project, and that there should be greater or more specific language that directs applicants to describe how the primary purpose and goal of their project is to increase access to benefits for disadvantaged communities if they're going to be credited to that specific set aside of funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jean Merrill, Liz O'Donoghue after that, and then Joshua Stark.
Jeannie Merrill with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. Today our comments focus on the integration of the two programs. And we commend the Strategic Growth Council staff and partner agencies for forwarding the country's first comprehensive climate change-oriented smart growth land use program aimed at supporting sustainable urban and rural communities. And the two programs combined, we think, offer an important path forward on how to support that compact infill development of cities and towns while also supporting vibrant agricultural communities at their borders. It's the integration of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program and the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program that urge you to more clearly articulate as we move forward. Projects supported by both programs must demonstrate that they are supporting smart growth strategies that create compact, affordable communities that reduce vehicle miles traveled, increase carbon sequestration, and avoid the conversion of agricultural lands to urban development. And that can be accomplished by clearly articulating that the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program will not support projects that convert agricultural land, both in its goals and objectives, but also in its application scoring, which we think is a critical piece. And for the Sustainable Lands Conservation Program, this can be accomplished by focusing on areas where the investment in agricultural conservation will be enhanced by smart growth land use policies and projects of the neighboring cities that include agricultural land conservation as their objectives. And we'll follow up with more specifics on those recommendations. But we look forward to working with the council and staff on this. We think it's an important path forward.
Thanks very much. Liz, and then Joshua Stark, Ella Wise after that.
Hi, I'm Liz O'Donoghue with the Nature Conservancy. I want to throw my seconds first to Jeannie Merrill's comments on the integration. I think, Mr. Fisher, you had some good suggestions at the beginning of this discussion of demonstrating real, tangible cooperation and collaboration between the two programs. I think if they remain siloed, we'll be losing out on a lot of benefits that can really be achieved. Second, I want to commend the inclusion of green infrastructure in the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program. There are real benefits to including green infrastructure. They provide multiple benefits, have tangible benefits to greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and really promote livability. Third, I want to also align my comments on the issue of co-benefits. As we know, littered throughout the statutes is a real important view of leveraging co-benefits in the cap and trade auction proceeds. And I think there can be some things that can be done to raise that up in this program. And then finally, I'd like to say that the primary goal and outcome for these investments are greenhouse gas reductions. And so it's important to know how they will be quantified and addressed and how they will be integrated in the program. One final thing, I want to really commend the staff for their great work and the council for their direction, and I really look forward to working with all of you in the development of these programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Joshua, Ella, and then Aaron Namela.
Hi. Joshua Stark again with Transform. We're also a founding member of the Sustainable Communities for All Coalition. First of all, a big thank you to staff and to you all for creating robust guidelines to catalyze new and innovative projects, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and provide great housing and transportation choices. We're pleased to see a clearly defined eligibility for transit subsidy programs. These programs have a demonstrable impact on ridership increases, a current example being the Santa Monica Any Ride, Anytime program, a cooperative effort between the City of Santa Monica and Santa Monica College, begun in 2008, that includes transit passes and route improvements. Last year, a record number of students and staff used the service, a 9% increase year over, and it's still growing this year. We're also extremely happy to see many of the trip reduction strategies we use in Transform's Green Trip Certification program, like lower parking ratios, residential transit passes, and on-site car sharing. There's very strong empirical evidence these strategies reduce vehicle miles traveled. In regards to the scoring of co-benefits, we recommend that the community orientation category should be given a larger proportion of the AHSC scoring elements and criteria than the 15 to 20% it currently constitutes. AB 32, AB 1532, and SB 862 all prioritize the maximizing of co-benefits and achieving greater affordability, along with greenhouse gas reductions. Increasing the category's proportion of the scoring element would more accurately represent the importance of co-benefits and affordability in project selection. Again, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you all and with staff on finalizing the guidelines.
Thank you. Ella, Aaron, and then Jeannie Wardwaller.
Good afternoon. My name is Ella Wise from the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. These draft guidelines represent such a tremendous effort on behalf of so many I'm honored to be supporting this incredibly exciting and important endeavor. As a city planner and a resident of California, I want to thank all of those who have contributed. With that, I have a few comments. And just like Deputy Secretary Kate White, I'd like to start with the purpose of the program, which is well laid out in the guidelines. The purpose of the program is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through projects that implement land use, housing, transportation, and agricultural land preservation practices, and that support related and coordinated public policy objectives. Some of those public policy objectives include achieving co-benefits, directing benefits to disadvantaged communities, and building affordable housing. Based on this purpose, my first concern is the lack of information about quantifying GHG reductions. Although the SGC is not directly responsible for developing the GHG quantification guidelines, it's hard to assess these guidelines without some concept of how the GHGs will be quantified. In fact, the critical question is still outstanding. These eligible projects will reduce greenhouse gas emissions compared to what? A threshold? A counterfactual? I understand the time constraint and it's an enormous project, but it's a critical component of the program. Secondly, I'm confident this was done repeatedly through the drafting process, but I'm going to do it again. I'd like to step back and make sure to raise the big question of whether these guidelines are meeting the purpose of the program. And I think working through specific project examples would be really helpful, and we want to extend our support in creating those specific project examples. So for instance,
Thank you.
Councilmember...
That's your time's allocated time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Aaron, and then Jeannie Wardwaller, Julie Snyder.
Good afternoon, Erin Niemela, representing the Infill Builders Federation. I want to thank the council and staff for all the hard work that's already gone into this issue. We supported the budget trailer bill as it moved through the process, and in particular, we have a number of nonprofit affordable housing members who, like the Infill Builder Federation in general, support the emphasis in the legislation and the emphasis in your proposed guidelines on affordable housing and on disadvantaged communities. However, as we look at the Venn diagram that we've looked at so much today, the ideal sweet spot for many of our members is the middle place between disadvantaged, with the overlap between disadvantaged communities and affordable housing. Many of our developers do projects in urban Los Angeles and the Bay Area, and they serve disadvantaged communities, but they may not be located in disadvantaged communities given the Cal Enviro screen. And the reason for that is many of these project developers and many of these localities are trying to get away from gentrification. And so many of the communities will be served in communities where they haven't traditionally been served. Also, specifically in the Bay Area, within those individual census tracts, there is broad disparity in income levels, and we appreciate that. And we want to get away from having a single income category in a single census tract. That's the goal. But unfortunately, the Cal Enviro screen part of the disadvantaged community component requirement, many of our developers believe may preclude that. And so we would just ask the council, to the degree that you have the discretion, that you take that into account as you move forward with the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. After Jeannie is Julie Snyder, and then Dave Snyder.
Hello again, Jeannie Wardwaller with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. I want to also commend staff and say that we're very supportive of this first draft and of the whole process. We will be submitting written comments, but I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, that I support the comments of several of my colleagues that have gone before in really asking you to lift up co-benefits and community involvement in the criteria. I think that is really critical to ensuring that these projects are effective, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And then I have two other specific recommendations. On the active transportation front for biking and walking infrastructure, it's really critical that we think more innovatively about these types of projects and of the types of infrastructure that people are really going to use. Things like cycle tracks, things like traffic calming, parking restricting speed, make a huge difference and are really critical to actually getting people biking and walking. So I would like to see that lifted up more in the guidelines. I would also encourage staff to think about school involvement and put schools really on par with employment centers in terms of scoring criteria. I think that's critical for a number of reasons. It will also help us get to some of the concerns of rural areas, because in many rural communities, the school is the primary public institution. And I think if we're thinking about connectivity to schools, we're going to help reduce VMT in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the council. Julie Snyder, representing Housing California. We're the statewide association of nonprofit housing developers and others working to increase the supply of homes that are affordable to all Californians. We're also a lead on the Sustainable Communities for All Coalition. First, like everyone else, I want to extend my compliments to the staff. I think this first draft is a very cohesive, elegant, and thoughtful approach to building in a number of different statutory and public policy requirements. Second, I want to support the suggestions from a number of our allies, especially around the community orientation scoring and the challenges of the minimum project size. It's very hard to find infill sites these days that will accommodate 100 units in urban areas or 50 units in suburban and rural. So we would like to see that revisited. And then third, I wanted to make two other specific suggestions. First, we appreciate the draft recognizes that large-scale public investment in transit and in market rate housing development can displace lower-income residents in disadvantaged communities. However, this phenomenon is just as likely to occur outside of disadvantaged communities to lower-income residents. We believe that protecting against physical and economic displacement along all transit lines is critical to the greenhouse gas success of this program. You want the people who are most likely to ride transit to actually be able to continue living near it. Therefore, we would recommend that anti-displacement provisions actually be a threshold requirement for every project that you consider funding. So we're not working at counter purposes in a state program. And then second, this program represents a very rare opportunity to both improve the environment and address a major issue in our urban areas of homelessness. People at the bottom of the income spectrum, those who are most at risk of becoming homeless, are also the most likely to ride transit, get rid of their cars, and use the system. So we would urge you to require every proposed housing development to have a minimum amount, maybe 10% to max the tax credit program, of homes that are affordable to extremely low-income households. Half of those are seniors and people with disabilities, so we'll be achieving multiple social and environmental goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave Snyder. And Holly Wonder after that.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Dave Snyder. I'm the executive director of the California Bicycle Coalition. And I want to start first by going back a couple agenda items and thanking Julia Kaplan and her work with Health and All Policies. I didn't get a chance to speak at that time, so I want to thank you for supporting the strategic direction there and give a shout out. I want to say how much I love the term integrated connectivity projects. I hope ICP becomes a common acronym, but I'm not sure that it is the right moniker to get at what you're trying to do here. Really what you're trying to do is talk about two different kinds of neighborhoods: transit-oriented development, very dense neighborhoods, and suburban and rural neighborhoods. And I don't think that ICP is a good description, because just like Councilor Bedsworth asked, can you do an ICP project in a TOD? And really, we want to have active transportation projects that connect destinations, ones that are integrated connectivity projects for active transportation everywhere, including in a transit-oriented development neighborhood. So, you know, and I fear that the way the guidelines are written, we're not going to get a standalone active transportation project in a dense urban neighborhood. I'm not even sure we're going to get a much standalone active transportation project in any neighborhood. And that's really important to leverage access to transit, and it's really important for lower income people who are way more likely to rely on bikes and walking for all of their transportation. We have to make that dignified, we have to make that easy, and we have to make it safe so that when they get a little bit of extra money, they don't buy a car. They can continue to rely on active transportation. So I urge you to figure out how to do something to bump up the chances that active transportation will get funded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Holly Wonder.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I am Holly Wonder, and I am the Director of Housing Development for Mutual Housing California. We are a nonprofit housing developer. We have been committed for 25 years to building housing for low-income families in our area. Our area includes both urban Sacramento and rural communities surrounding. Our most recent project is in Woodland. So we're familiar with both urban and non-urban development challenges. We've also been extremely committed to the goals of sustainable development and energy efficiency and reducing energy loads by creating zero net energy communities. So I think as much as anybody, we're excited, we're delighted, and we're thrilled to see this, this resource made available to us in the work that we do. Having said that, I will say that reviewing these proposed guidelines is rather daunting. The work that we do is hard, and this looks harder than anything we've ever done before. And so I would just make the urge for simplicity that I've heard already here today. I would also urge to consider the variety of situations in our varied communities throughout California. We have communities where transit is rich and the opportunity to build TOD is waiting for us. We have communities that don't have a lot of transit options, but where there's still opportunities to reduce vehicle miles traveled, perhaps not so much by looking at proximity to a major transit stop, but by looking at where we locate housing within those communities so that people will be driving less. I'm running out of time. I'm going to choose, and also, the political variations in communities. Some communities have strong regional planning, some communities don't. So to tie us as developers are eager to provide this by limiting to that I would hate for that to be a barrier for our success. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to thank everybody for their comments. I apologize for rushing through everybody. We need to keep on a schedule, and I just want to let everybody know there are a couple of other opportunities to give input. Number one, through the internet and the website, which is ahsc.sgc. Where do we have it here? At sgc.ca.gov, and we have four sessions with public sessions outreach, and again those dates and times are on a handout in the back. Why don't we open it up now, Matt? Since you were the one that wanted the public comments, why don't we ask you to go first?
A couple of things. First, let me commend the chair for running a very efficient meeting here. Okay, it's on. It just doesn't want to hear me. Also, let me, and I should have done this earlier, commend the staff. Yeah, I realize how difficult this task is. It's enormously complicated, and in particular because you're trying to deal with so many different policies that are at play here. And I think they've done a very good job of looking at those policies and trying to integrate them into these guidelines. Having said that, and addressing some of the issues that were raised by the staff, at least initially, I'll keep it short and just agree with Secretary Laird that I think on the role of the MPOs, the legislation sort of outlines the role. We're to coordinate with the MPOs, and we certainly want the input of the MPOs on these projects as they're coming in, and it will be input that will be given to us, and then we'll consider it here, so people will know how it's figured into our decision-making process. So I think that we need to consult with and hear from the MPOs, and we need to build that into the process. On the award size, I didn't hear an awful lot on that today. I will say that I, like many of the commentators here, found this to be enormously complex. And to the extent that we can remove some of the complexity from these provisions and provide us with an opportunity for a little bit more flexibility, particularly in this this growing period of this program, I think that would be very, very helpful. So I would just ask the staff to take a look at the minimums and the maximums here, and come back with a rationale for why the recommendations are whatever they are at the end of the day. But I would argue in favor of flexibility to the extent that we can. I think that's one of the ways to deal with the concern that we heard from some of the folks who are dealing with rural projects. I'd be concerned about set-asides specifically for rural projects, but I don't want anything in the guidance that would prevent rural projects from competing here. And I think we do need to take a look at this. Geographic distribution, I think that's a factor that we should consider, but in line with what I've been saying about flexibility, I'd be reluctant to require a certain geographic distribution at this point. Maybe it's a factor that we can consider, how many projects do we have in a given area, but I don't think that I would like to see a hard and fast rule on geographic distribution for a whole number of reasons. And again, I think we just need to provide ourselves with some flexibility. Greenhouse gas quantification, at the end of the day, I am very sensitive to the many comments that came on about community orientation and how that has to be an important part of scoring any project. On the other hand, I'll also say that we really need to focus at the end of the day on making sure that we're getting greenhouse gas reductions. We really need to work with ARB on that, and I think it's very important to come up with some specific guidance on how we're going to quantify those reductions, and I think that needs to be an important part of the scoring as we're looking at these projects. So that, off the top of my head, since I have to go first here, is some of my thoughts on some of the issues that you've raised. We'll work with you, I think, in terms of some of the other issues that I saw. As I said, to the extent that we can instill some flexibility in this process, I think that will be helpful for everyone. And I think at this point I'll leave it at that and allow some of the other members to speak.
Secretary Laird.
I think it was a very wise decision to have Secretary Rodriguez go first, because I think he summarized it very well, and I pretty much subscribe to everything he said. And I would do two brief additions. One is that with regard to the agricultural land section, almost nobody had any comments, and so I'm going to take that to mean that the direction is generally a place that people have a level of comfort with. And the other thing I'd just say is this is the beginning of a process. There are the workshops, and I think what people heard today about some of the quantifications in the grants are things that people might think about and bring forth alternatives or opinions to the workshops, because this just opens the comment period. We're not taking action. This isn't the end all. So just think about that. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the comments today.
Thank you very much. I share Secretary Caballero. I'll get it.
That's good.
By next meeting. I share the concerns around the quantification of the GHG reduction and how that can be used to actually score projects. I think that's a very, very complicated issue, and I think we have to think carefully about that. I have concerns about the issues of displacement and replacement, which are two separate issues, and the disadvantaged communities. I am very concerned that we are careful to achieve the goals that we want to achieve in terms of displacement and replacement without destroying the viability of projects, and that's a careful balance. And so I hope that we pay careful attention to that. I'm also concerned about how we are going to balance the geographic distribution of the grants and still achieve the goals of the program. I'm a little concerned with using as a measure or as a way of distribution the single jurisdiction idea, meaning that in a large city, and I'll use LA as an example, with 469 square miles, that they could have one project, and a very small city with a few square miles would qualify for a project. I think we want the best projects, but I do agree that we do have to think about distribution. We do have to make sure that the money is spread at least in some way, but the bottom line is greenhouse gas reduction.
Just a few comments. I think I agree. I think when I read through the guidelines the first time, I think my first question was, are these going to be accessible to all communities? And I think that's an important question for us to keep in mind. They are very complicated, and so I think attempts to keep it accessible and simple are important. And I think along those, similarly on the role of the MPOs, I think what one of our last commenters said, different MPOs have different capacities, and I think we want to keep that in mind as we think about, and different relationships and engagements with local governments. And so reflecting that and how we take into account MPOs, I think will be important. On greenhouse gas reduction quantification, it's critical. It's it's a threshold requirement. I think the other is what we do with it is the confidence we have in the methodology. And I think what we've heard here, it's really complicated. And so I think until we really know what the methodology is, I would say we sort of keep that question open. I think the other thing I'll flag, which gets a little bit more specific, but I think is really critical, because hopefully this is going to be a growing program over the next several years, and we're making investments in really important infrastructure in California, in housing and in transportation, is that these investments need to be reflecting our state's priorities, which of course greenhouse gas emission reduction is one, climate resilience is another. So I think it's very important that in these guidelines we're reflecting the priorities that we've put in the Safeguarding California plan and in other documents are reflected in this program. So I would include the Ocean Protection Council's sea level rise guidance should be brought in here. There's nice conversation about energy efficiency and green building. I would also think about how we talk about green infrastructure in the program. That should be not just something we're investing in, it should be a priority. And that is also consistent with the safeguarding plan. So those are just things I would flag as we continue to go through this, that we think about this. This is an important greenhouse gas emission reduction program, of course, but it also should reflect our broader state priorities. And I think going in this first year, it's really critical that we have as robust projects as we can. And I think regardless of what number that is, I think we want projects with really quantifiable emission reduction benefits, the co-benefits, all those pieces that we can characterize them as clearly and concisely as we can, so that we can show the success of this program going forward. And I think that should really be something key that we keep in mind, particularly in this first year. So thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Caballero and the others, as you go through, if you could comment, if you have any thoughts on the award size. It's one thing we haven't talked much about, the trade-offs between increasing or decreasing the award size, in addition to the comments that you were planning to make.
That's one of the areas that I have the hardest dealing with, frankly, because I think it's going to depend on what kinds of applications we see. And I was impressed with how few awards we get. But having said that, you know, at one point there was a discussion about why don't we just do one big project and really put it all into that so that people could see the benefit of that. And of course, that would never fly. That's not what anybody wants to do. So I have a hard time with that, frankly, Chair. I think we're going to have to take a look at what we receive and try to figure out if the award sizes that we've envisioned based on past experience with TOD projects actually work. And we may be back here looking at something substantively different if we find out that we're really only going to get a few very large projects and they need more support. So that's probably as far as I can go with that. John, I think the Ag Land presentation was great, and we probably should have at least commented on that. My concern is that there's just not enough money in it. And so the real question is, how do you leverage the other resources that are out there? And so I expect you'll be back with that answer once you get going, but I think it's great. I agree with Matt. The flexibility, looking at the minimum and maximums is an important thing. And then I pretty much spoke to everything else except for one other thing, and that is, I know that the Air Board recently was grappling with the whole issue of disadvantaged community, and the question they had to deal with is it a location, or is it a geographic location, or is it a population? So as you're building affordable housing, does the affordable housing have to be in a poor community, located in a poor community? And I know they're going to be coming back and looking at that as grants come in. And I want to just say that putting more low-income people in neighborhoods where the health risks are high doesn't make any sense to me. And so what we really want to do is to be able to create opportunities to build affordable housing in areas where there's more opportunity for success and healthier outcomes. And so I think that we're gonna hear a little bit more about that. But I think that's important. You really want to create resiliency. So, and I spoke to the other issues. So I think that's pretty much what I have to say today.
You want to go next?
So on the ag land piece, because it is such limited dollars, I agree with Jeannie Merrill that I think we have to look at this ag land piece as being complementary to our sustainable communities, and where it's possible to really think about high priority ag land that helps to create hard boundaries of where we're going. But that also can create opportunities on the food access piece of what we all work on in healthy communities, is making sure that we still keep agriculture that's viable in those communities. And a lot of that can be creating opportunities for new beginning farmers and smaller scale farmers, and that becomes a really important part of sustainable communities. So that was the easy thing I was going to talk to. We have to remember this is our first year, and it's really important that what we do can achieve success, because success breeds success. And so as much as I'm a big proponent of co-benefits, and we want to be able to account for those co-benefits wherever they are, at the end of the day, we have to be about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And sorry, Cynthia, Air Board, you have a lot on your shoulders with the methodologies to help us do that, but I think that has to be a driver in this first year of really being able to quantify that, to prove that this is a program that's worth putting more money into. When it comes to disadvantaged communities, I agree with you, Secretary. I think we have to really think about where are we investing in our infrastructure that creates opportunities and doesn't isolate people to continue to be in a place that may not have the schools, may not have the access to health care, may not have the job opportunities or the job training, and think more holistically about how we want to be able to do that. And that may be this, that's why I'm very proud of what you guys did as far as trying to look beyond just, remember I'm new to this whole transportation TDO thing, but the ICP thing I think is a very important component of that, and how we can create a better California by being able to do that. So I would say I wouldn't get hung up on funding a lot of grants. I go through this, I run a grant program, and the more money we get, the more complicated it gets about how do we really move the needle. And I would think about if you get a few projects that we know really can move the needle, I think your ranges are fine for now, and let's get some feedback on that. But I would not get married to that. I would want to really focus on prioritizing what's really going to show success and help us move the needle.
A couple comments on the involvement of the metropolitan planning organizations. I think we didn't have many of them speak today. Mike, I think, represented most of them, but I think staff has been working hard with them, and I think there's some ideas out there that may be mutually acceptable to find a path of receiving some meaningful input and involvement, but still, as Secretary Laird mentioned, following that intent of the legislation that this is a state-level competitive program. On the geographic equity, rural equity, I do think that is important. Maybe it gets to the art versus the science. I think one of the reasons this is fairly complex in its drafting is staff is trying to be very transparent and with the scoring and so forth. But at the same time, I think if all of the projects get grouped, say, along the coast or just in larger urban areas, we're missing an opportunity maybe to use this as the catalyst type of project to, bring this investment to all, well, not all, but make this program distributed across the state so that communities are annually or interested in applying and see there's an opportunity for a successful application, so they're in the game trying to look at ways they can do these things in their community. So
I'm just wondering, we don't have the money in this round and it's not the right time, but I think in the future, one of the things I keep focused on is how do we help build capacity to help bring communities that may not otherwise be able to be as competitive. What are we putting into our system to make sure that we're constantly building capacity and filling the pipeline with, maybe it's not this year, but it's a phased approach to being able to get those kinds of things accomplished.
I just wanted to add a couple of comments. Number one, there was some discussion and comments about the GHG metrics. We've touched on that a little bit. I'm not sure what the timing is on receiving the GHG metrics and how we're going to think about because maybe someone can speak to them.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Marvin with ARB. And what we're planning to do, what we've committed to do, is to provide at least references to reasonable metrics that SGC can include in the final version of the guidance that comes to the council in December. So we would certainly hope to have pieces that are available before that. We have this program and many other programs lined up, and we'll be starting work on that in the next couple of weeks.
I mean, you obviously see the importance of these metrics and us being able to approve the final guidelines. So we need them well enough in advance and to be able to filter the guidelines through them, because that's what we're going to be using ultimately to assess these projects. So thanks for
importance understood.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to bring up was we had one comment from infill builders. I think we've got I don't know how many private sector folks we're talking to about this, but that's a critical component to. I mean, the NGO sector was very well represented here in many different areas, environmental, housing, et cetera. But for these programs to work, as Louise pointed out too, we need jobs, we need retail, and these other programs these other components have to be an important part of any housing. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I think that's a very important point to acknowledge. I think throughout this process, we've worked with the NGOs and other stakeholders. They're familiar faces, and I think one of the things, Mr. Fisher, that you have helped us do through your work on the council is really connect us better to private sector, actual developers, in addition to the nonprofit, for-profit affordable housing developers that we've seen here. I think, Ms. Goldberg, you can also play a really critical role in helping to bring some of those opinions forward and thoughts. Again, this is not your typical state program. although it apparently from the Venn diagrams it might look like it might be that way. But what we want to try to do is encourage that kind of innovation and thoughtfulness about how to actually build these projects. The people who are building these projects often tend to be not necessarily in this conversation, so we want to continue to include that. So thanks. And so thank you, Ms. Goldberg, for just participating and providing that opportunity.
Okay, any other council comments?
I just had one question about the guidelines, and that is that it seemed like one of the prerequisites to filing an application is that you really had to have a project that was ready to go. You were just looking for financing, in that, as I read it, and this is what I'm asking for confirmation on, you needed to have your CEQA compliance already. You had to have all your permits already. You were really looking for financing, and I'm just wondering whether that puts us in, confines us. I understand there's an interest in having shovel-ready projects, but I'm just wondering how many projects that are out there that have all their approvals, they're just looking for that final bit of financing.
That's a really good question, and I think what we are, to confirm, we are looking for shovel-ready projects with the bulk of their entitlements, land, site control, all of the things that you need to put a shovel in the ground and get a project up. There are some things that we do allow for in terms of some of the planning, pre-development changes, some other smaller tweaks and adjustments that would be allowable costs for that. But it's not, but the primary goal is to get things built and get them built soon.
Do we think there are enough of them out there, I guess is the question that I have.
Alice, maybe Claudia can, since she's been in the finance game for a long time, might want to talk about that readiness capacity.
We believe that we have, at least for this round, enough projects.
Okay.
With the end of redevelopment, there were many backlogged that did not get funded, but the proof will be in the pudding, and we'll constantly monitor that. I need to also say that unfortunately, CEQA, not having CEQA completed represents a significant vulnerability, and we need to balance that out as well.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure whatever we were doing was that we were going to get projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll, I mean, I'm as hopeful as you are.
Okay.
I hope we do.
Okay.
I received no general comments from anybody, so just to summarize, I want to thank first everybody for attending. I thought those were great comments, very helpful for the council and for the staff who's going to take these away, start the workshops. We'll come back in this room on December 11th, hopefully to approve the final guidelines. So there's not a small amount of work to be done between now and then. And I want to thank the staff for massive work that you guys have done to get us this far. I mean, this is a huge amount of thinking and effort that's gone into this from so many different departments. I think really exhibiting the kind of behavior that the SGC also wants to emulate. So thank you for that. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.